I'm Daniel Blackman,
I'm Eric Cohen.
and welcome to Bluetopsy. Today we have a fun friend from the other side of the county, somebody that we love and respect, newly elected, phenomenal woman, and she has something in common with my wife, Eric. She went to Spelman College.
I know that.
I went to Clark Atlanta University. Shout out to the Atlanta University Center. And I'm just going to go ahead and just open it up for her because we're excited to have a young lady in the room who I'm going to let you introduce, but someone that not only, like I said, do we respect, but someone who is in what the AJC, the Washington Post, and the New York Times have all called a battleground county, right? Mm-hmm. So Elizabeth Warren has recently visited Gwinnett. Eric, who do we have in the studio today?
Bianca Keaton. She is the new head of the Gwinnett County Democratic Party. And as you said, Daniel, you hear about Gwinnett everywhere. You are in an important spot.
Yes. Gwinnett really catapulted to the national stage last year when voter suppression, kind of became the middle name, like Gwinnett Voter Suppression County. We had an unprecedented amount of absentee ballots rejected for, exact match signature reasons. We had polls with lines 4 hours long. We had, precincts without power for several hours. Right. So there was a lot going on, and conveniently, all these things impacted communities of color.
Mm-hmm. Now, look, when I was, I no longer serve as the chair of the 7th Congressional District, but we saw so many things come out of Gwinnett. And for me, I think it's critical and it's important. You guys have the Martyr referendum coming up. You guys have opportunities in Gwinnett to, unlike many other counties that have just come out of the election in 2018, you guys jump right back into the foray. So how confident are you, not just in the vote, but in the infrastructures around the fairness of this election? I know that's one issue that you have been very keen on, and we've recently seen community leaders like Reverend Warnock out of Atlanta join the fight with Stacey Abrams to make sure that our elections are fair. So what are you guys doing in anticipation of the upcoming elections? And could you just kind of give us more of an idea about why it's so important for, even if you're not in Gwinnett County, for us to be supporting this measure that will be coming out of Gwinnett in March in a couple weeks?
Okay, I'm going to have to unpack a little bit of that. That was like a few questions in one. But I will say that this transit referendum has a huge impact, or will have a huge impact, overall for the state of Georgia, and especially the Atlanta metro region. It's going to create transportation opportunities that will connect our counties so that we don't have to be commuter residents who, in Gwinnett, we spend a lot of time. A lot of folks that live in Gwinnett actually don't work there. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they're not really doing much living or playing in Gwinnett either because they're not in Gwinnett.
And you told that story about you being in the car with your daughter and about your commute from Norcross to Marietta. And I think that's important for people to know that you have a story that goes along. You're not just giving an example.
No, not at all. I was working for the Cobb County Board of Commissioners, Lisa Cupid out there.
Shout out to Lisa.
And I was, my commute every morning would be at least an hour and 15 minutes.
Wow.
Now, without traffic, the commute would be 30 minutes. And so I had what I would call like these three omens or whatever. It was like these transportation like tragedies that really let me know that I needed to make some changes in what I was doing. So the first one was when the woman was walking on 285 in the middle of, or I don't know, I can't say middle of the night, but wee hours of the morning.
That's right, I remember.
And she was dismembered, her body, strewn apart because cars were hitting her.
Yeah.
And they shut down 285.
And unfortunately, on 400 today, we had a pedestrian threatening to jump off of the bridge by Haynes Bridge. And then we had in Spaghetti Junction, we had an individual, unfortunately, a pedestrian struck by a vehicle just this morning.
Just this morning. It happened again. And I think it is just so bizarre that history is repeating itself. People are not having transit options. And that was just like the first thing that happened. It took me 3.5 hours to get to work that one morning.
Wow.
When they shut down 285. And this was after trying to exit the expressway and take the side streets into the office. It took 3.5 hours just to navigate any back channels over into Cobb. And the second one was when the airplane crashed on my exit. Do you remember that? The fatalities associated with that. And, it was just kind of like, well, if something like that happens, it makes it so much more difficult. Like if they shut down the expressway, there's not a lot of options you have for connectivity getting from, a place like Cobb County over to Gwinnett. And then the third one was 85 collapsing because that, like, I got home just before the news broke and I turned on the TV and I was like, oh my gosh, I was just out there. Wow. Like, and
that's a route I used to take every single day. Yeah. I still take it pretty frequently.
Yeah. I mean, it was insane, to see, this inferno. And I was just like, I gotta leave my job. Like, I just cannot keep doing this because I knew that it was going to mean a more disastrous commute. And it went up to more than 2 hours. And at the time, my daughter was just over 1 year old.
Wow.
So, all that time, even without all those incidents, I spent more time in the car than I was able to spend with her at home. Wow. And so
that says a lot as a parent because I have 3 children, 3 boys. Eric has 3 boys. And, I feel like every opportunity, especially having a son going into high school next year, every
Congrats.
Opportunity. Oh, don't! I'm on the fence right now because the thing I'm worried about is not the fact that he's about to be in high school. It's the fact that he is already telling me that he's ready to drive me around in 6 months, and I'm not sure I'm ready to put him in the driver's seat.
No. We have the opposite problem. So we have twins, right?
Yeah.
They're sophomores in high school. We basically can't pay them to get their permit.
That was me.
Okay.
So I can relate. I'm sorry.
Right.
Well, I mean, and the funny thing though, I kind of jumped into the pool head first, but a lot of people that know about you, they love you and admire you, and then there are folks that feel like there's some ambition there, right? And sometimes ambition and newness, it makes people a little nervous. But who are you, right? Because you're a mom, and we know that you have had a stint. In D.C., and you've done some really good work there. I'd like for you to let our listening audience know who you are. I mean, I've already mentioned Spelman College, and I want to talk about HBCUs before we leave here today. But outside of Spelman College, where are you from? What motivated you to even get involved in politics? Like, we know your background, but for our listening audience, share with us some of the things that inspired you to be involved and engaged, and then what made you even think to be focused enough to now become the chair of Gwinnett County's Democratic Party?
Goodness. I don't even know if I have enough time to answer this in the way that it deserves to be answered. But first, let me say, I have absolutely zero ambition to run for office.
Okay.
And the attention that has come my way makes me uncomfortable. I'm shy in many respects.
That's what you guys call a servant leader. My bad. Go ahead. Keep going.
I so understand.
I love it.
I'm shy in many respects, and I recognize that with that attention will come a lot of other things. So there's going to be another shoe that drops somewhere, and she ain't this, she ain't that. I mean, I'm already experiencing a good bit of that. And even when, I was drafted, I would say. I did not want to be chair. I did not want to be chair. I was like, well, can't somebody else do it? I was looking for other people to do it. I was looking over the list, and, all the fingers kept pointing back to me. But there was a concentrated effort from folks in the Gwinnett community and around it that actually cared about having a field program in the county being more productive, for me to be a part of that, because they knew bits of my background. They knew that I'd been on the coordinated campaign. And so they were like, you know what to do. Even if you don't feel like it, you need to be this. And so that's why I kind of jumped into that. But, to be honest, I'm from the south side of Chicago, and, I come from very humble beginnings. And have shared that at the time that I was born, my mother didn't have a place of her own. Like, she was homeless.
Yeah.
So she had me and my older sister as a single mother. Yeah. So I do have a brother, but from my dad.
Okay.
So my mother was taken in by my aunt, who was like a second mother to me, and we had a pretty tough go of it, because we would go wherever anybody would take us if my mother wasn't able to sustain herself, or whatever the circumstances. It's hard being a parent in general.
Yeah.
But to be a single parent with 2 children in a place like Chicago, it put us through some things. So, we lived in shelters for stints of time, and, really struggled trying to just live. So for a very long period of time, I, was more in survival mode than anything else. And I think that some of the things that I experienced or witnessed, they really did shape and transform my life. And I will touch on a couple of those things. Mm-hmm. To see at 8 years old, a childhood friend be struck down with bullets, and a gun that was found right by the school that we went to.
Wow.
I was scared to go home, so I'm going over here because it's the only safe place I know. But a kid picked up that gun that they found by our school, brought it to the house, and she was dead that night.
Wow.
And, had the circumstances been even just slightly different, that bullet could have struck me. Mm-hmm. And, that wouldn't be the only, instance of violence that I would see or even experience personally. And the thing that actually did shape my path to get to Spelman, or to even want to go to college in the first place, was an attempted gang rape. Just across the street from my school.
Wow.
And, it was that experience that made me feel so vulnerable.
Was this against someone you knew, or against you personally, or what?
Yeah, it was against me.
Wow. And in you saying that, because the reason why I wanted to ask that is we are increasingly a part of this time of this Me Too movement. And I was very privileged to work for Vice President Biden, well, not to work for, but to support his White House initiative, It's On Us, which was a campaign to end sexual violence against men, women, and children. And to really hear that story and to know the importance of people being able to share their story, because that can help somebody and encourage someone else. It's powerful.
Yeah, it is. It is. I didn't tell anybody that it happened.
Yeah.
Until I was over 30. Well, I mean, I may have talked to other of my peers.
Yeah.
But I never actually told my mother that happened until I was in my 30s. She saw me change. She saw who I would hang out with change.
Yeah.
I changed myself and said that if I wanted to, if I didn't want stuff like that to happen to me, then I had to go to college. Mm-hmm. And I put every ounce of energy I had into that, even when we didn't have lights on at the house or hot water or, any of those things.
One thing before you finish that sentence, Melissa Klink was on yesterday. Mm-hmm. The thing that I admire about you and Melissa is the humble beginnings and how far you've come. And I had to say this, as you were talking, because I spoke at a school in Tampa last year. And the area I talked, it was called Suitcase City, because there's so much poverty that on average kids are not at one school for more than 3 months. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading something about you that said that in 1 year you had attended like 10 schools. And
so let me jump in here. Mm-hmm. So that was a misquote, and I tried to fix that.
Okay.
But I did change a lot of schools, and I know that I changed as many as 3 in a year, but I changed a whole bunch over a span of time. And so, like, for my sister, she might have changed that many times in a year. My mom was like, my mom got on me. She said, that ain't how that happened. And I said, Mama, I know, I tried. Look, I tried to fix it. So, on the record, I want to fix that.
Well, that's what Bluetopsy is for, right here.
That I do want to fix that. But yes, we did change schools quite a bit, multiple times. And if not every year, then it was multiple times within a year.
Got you.
Within a year that we were changing schools. And that's when, I was placed in like a learning disability class.
Wow.
Because they assumed that I just had a hard time learning rather than the fact that I was getting gaps in my education by transferring schools so many times.
Wow.
In the city, in the south suburbs, in the west suburbs. Like, we were everywhere all around the Chicago area, in Indiana at one point. So like I can recall different things just based on where we were living. I can talk about those things.
So I would think that Chicago kind of has like this kind of blueprint of how you see things. Okay, so my parents lived up there for a decade. And like you would see the South Side divide. Like, you'd go there and you know how awful it is. And then you could go up by like Wrigley Field and literally the people are like, oh yeah, my doors are unlocked, you know, whatever. And like you see, it's the perfect example of almost essentially what is wrong with, you know,
income inequality
in this country.
And the irony in what Eric is saying is, you know, too often we see immense pockets of prosperity. I remember I'm from a military family. My mother and father immigrated here from Barbados. My father joined the United States Army, became an Army Ranger. I lived all over the country. And I think because I was exposed to so much, it had an impact on who I am. Yeah. But before I came to Atlanta, you know, I had heard from everyone that, you know, it's this black mecca and there's so much wealth in Atlanta, and you're not going to, you know, black folks historically from Auburn Avenue to Cascade has done this, but then you still see immense poverty. And to Eric's point, you know, all over America, in Baltimore and Chicago and Boston, where I was born, and, you know, I heard Ayanna Pressley say the same thing. You know, we see these stretches where on the one end we're seeing immense amounts of prosperity, but then we're seeing disproportionate amounts of poverty. And I think that is something that is so critical. And how has that helped to shape you as the leader you are today, to have been able to see one angle, but then go to an institution like Spelman and be exposed to more? And now here you sit in the midst of all you've gone through, and you now sit here before us and before our listening audience as the chairwoman of the Democratic Party of Gwinnett County. I mean, like what does that mean for you?
So the journey hasn't been an easy one. Yeah. And it's been, you know, fraught with lots of fears and anxiety. And, you know, going back to that attempted rape, it colored my whole perception, that I thought that if I got out of there and I went to college, that I would be safe. And when I got to Spelman, I felt like I could finally rest. It was like the one time where I felt like, okay, now I could like really sleep and be okay. Yeah. But, you know, it was also kind of like the onset of a depression, because it was such a culture shock that I had not known that Black people were wealthy. You know, from a child's view, I thought that if you were white, it meant that you were rich. Wow. And that if you were Black, it meant that you were poor, because it was all that I saw. Yeah. Or at least my perception of, you know, the white community that I did see was just that they were so much better off than we were. And I know that that's not true. But that was what I thought. And going through those experiences, I would be met with a lot of classism, you know, or maybe I wasn't particularly welcome in spaces. So in some spaces, I'm too educated. I think I'm too good. Yeah. In another space, I'm not good enough. Yeah. You know, there are lots of these identity politics that shape the rooms in which people feel like you should be able to walk in. Having a job on the Hill was definitely a privilege that I would not have been afforded had I not gone to a school like Spelman College, where I had friends in places that had gone and done things and, you know, connected me to people that would extend an invitation for me to even be able to walk the halls for a visit. Wow. And, you know, those are some of the things that kind of, you know, opened up some doors for me, kind of getting in there, staying in there, learning, bringing all that stuff back to Georgia. I realized in working with Commissioner Cupid that there was a big disconnect. Of course, being in D.C., you think you know everything. And if you've ever met a Hill staffer, you know, you probably couldn't tell them much. Yeah. But that's just kind of how it is, you know. You get up there, you learn a whole lot. The demands are crazy, fast. But it's detached from the real lives that people are living at home. I didn't see my experience reflected in policy conversations that actually reflected people going through those, rather it was people trying to translate it for people of my experience and telling me that I shouldn't sit at tables to make certain decisions because maybe I wasn't quite qualified enough. And I feel like if you have that experience in certain things, you're qualified to speak on it to whomever.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there should be no limits and walls in that respect. And so I've worked to be able to be in a position to have my voice heard. And, you know, it hasn't been a crystal stair, even though, you know, it seems glamorous to work on the Hill, to work in government and to serve people. But
Trial by fire.
Trial by fire.
Well, one thing I want to ask you, and I know Eric wants to steer in the leadership and Georgia being a battleground state in all kind of different areas, but you mentioned the platform that Spelman College gave, and you know I know how important it you know historically black colleges, for those that don't know, can be for you know the minds of black men and women around the country and historically, and there's a lot of people that don't understand it, but just for our listening audience, I want you to know that HBCUs represent less than 3% of colleges and universities in the United States, yet they produce 23% of all African American graduates, 40% of all STEM degrees come out of historically black colleges, 60% of all engineering degrees for African American students come out of historically black colleges, 70% of African American dentists, physicians earn degrees at historically black colleges and universities. In 2000, Xavier in New Orleans by itself produced more successful African-American medical school applicants than Johns Hopkins University, Harvard, and the University of Maryland combined. And in 2018, the New York School of Medicine announced that any student enrolled in its medical degree program, regardless of race, would attend free. The reason why I wanted to bring up all those numbers and what I wanted you to speak to is we're now seeing challenges by many of our historically black colleges to stay open. The perspective I want our listeners to know is that Harvard has a $37.1 billion endowment. Princeton has a $24.6 billion endowment. Again, these are billions of dollars. Emory has a $6.7 billion endowment, yet Morehouse has a $135 million endowment. Spelman has a $367 million endowment, and Clark Atlanta, my alma mater, has a $66.7 million endowment. The challenge of these schools being able to function and compete with schools like Harvard, which is a great school, and Princeton and Emory, how important is it for our schools to remain, and when I say our schools, I mean how important is it for historically black colleges to remain accessible and open to young men and women of color that not just come from your background, but come from all parts of the country?
Definitely, I think it's very important that they remain open. I had one of the privileges I had as a student at Spelman was to serve as the student trustee on the board of trustees there.
Okay.
And it gave me the behind the curtain look at what was going on and what the college needed to survive and to thrive. And I do believe that there is a great disconnect. You know, oh goodness, like a school like Harvard has been built on like a history of privilege.
Yeah.
And you know, Spelman's history is rooted in the struggle.
That's right.
The struggle of institutional racism and just flat out just segregation and systems meant to not work for or serve communities of color.
You're right.
So,
and many people don't know that John Rockefeller's wife, the namesake Spelman, comes from her maiden name. So the Rockefeller family played a critical role in helping to establish, because of the segregated South and because of so many Jim Crow laws that prevented students of color to attend public universities and institutions. Yeah.
And you get a thorough education at Spelman about that. And I'm sure you got a thorough education at Clark and Morehouse. Right. Like if you go to our schools, you're going to learn the history through and through, and you develop an appreciation for it. But what we've got to do is, you know, to when we have opportunities of privilege, to return the favor.
Amen. I agree.
You will see Samuel Jackson and his wife Latanya Jackson. They give a lot. To both Morehouse and Spelman.
Yeah.
Those school, Spike Lee. But we need more people to do it. And sometimes just even, thinking about me being chair of the party is that sometimes you don't see yourself as being capable of doing things that you very well can do. But you can't do it all by yourself. But if we all do our part,
that's right, then
we can put our institutions in a much better position. The money we give to political campaigns, I'm going to hold myself to that and try to match that the money that I would put into politics into Spelman.
Yeah.
Because I know what Spelman did for me.
This is a side note because I think this might make you guys laugh because being the not black person on the show today, so a good friend of mine, he is like, hey, I think I'm going to apply to Morehouse, and he goes to me, you should apply with me. And I was like, that's interesting. And this is a true story. I seriously contemplated it, but in the end, he ended up not applying. And so I was
we had a white kid at Clark when I was there. We had one, but then he ended up pledging. I think the misnomer is that historically black colleges only have black students, and there are a lot of campuses that have significant numbers of white students on the campuses. So
I knew that. See.
Shout out to Eric, man. He's smarter than I am right now.
That's so funny. Well, Spelman has had a lot of different students to attend, and the thing that I'm gonna speak to both of you is that at Spelman we take this class called African Diaspora in the World.
Yep, we do at Clark too.
And we talk about how the slave trade and colonialism, just impacted, the trajectory of all of our lives from a heritage standpoint. Mm-hmm. So we know that none of us are pure-blooded. Right. None of us are pure-blooded. Mm-hmm. But in a place like Spelman, you experience all the cultures of the world. There were, not just a multitude of identities from the African diaspora, all the islands and, different countries in Africa represented at our school. But, there were Hispanic students, there were white students, and Morehouse even had a white valedictorian. I remember So, our schools are not ever intended to be segregated.
Right.
But it is a very special thing to be affirmed in your identity in a college like ours.
I want to go back to the MARTA vote for a minute.
Sure.
Because that's so important. So we know that, what did it cost? $700,000 for them to do the election in March versus having done it in November, right? Was that the additional cost?
I hear that it was actually over $1 million when it was all said and done. Okay. The initial projection was about $750,000, but in the end, it was over $1 million.
So we would assume the reason they did that is because they'd like to have the highest no vote that they could get. Would that be the answer?
I wouldn't say that it was to have the highest no vote, but that it was an effort to suppress the yes votes. Okay. So they knew that if it had gone in November, that it would have passed. Right. So it was definitely very intentional for it to be placed in March, when we haven't had any ballot initiatives with votes over 30,000 that actually turn out. Okay. Yeah. Maybe between 30 something, between 30 and 50,000, but that's very low. We have almost 500,000 registered voters, and to only have that many show up is not a very good thing.
Right. So, all right. So, what's Plan B? So, let's say it doesn't pass. What's because it's obviously it's a necessity for where we are, up 400. As you know, the North Spring station it stops. That should be going all the way up to Windward. Stopping along the way. So Fulton needs to have the expansion. What happens if it doesn't pass? What are people saying moving forward?
I think people are looking at different options for it. Some folks are saying, put it back on for 2020. Mm-hmm. in November in 2020. Some folks are saying, well, maybe there's a more administrative route that can get us there, through the ATL system. So that wouldn't necessarily be MARTA, and it's a different system. So there's like all this talk about it. I don't really like to entertain that stuff. Right. I want to deal with, where we are, what we can possibly do. And even though we know that they set this up for failure, we're still going to work for it and to see if we can get there. We know that transit is desired in Gwinnett. And so we're going to do everything we can to make sure that it comes, because we can't afford for it not to.
Right. And March 19th is the date for that, correct?
So early voting actually started on Monday of this week. So you can currently go vote now at the main elections office in Gwinnett if you're able to. And
if you're listening to this and it is not March 19th and you do not live in Gwinnett, how can people support you? Forsyth County, Melissa Klink, myself, Eric Cohen, we're going to roll up our sleeves and help and knock on doors, whatever you need us to do. How can other counties reach out to you and support you in this effort, whether that means folks in Lumpkin, Whitehall, or Raven want to come down or make phone calls? What can other counties do around Georgia to help?
We do have some sign-ups, so if folks want to volunteer, they can go. Here, I'm going to pull it up so I can read that. Wasn't quite ready for that, but
well, while she's looking, I'm going to stall. The Democratic Party of Georgia is putting its weight behind it. I know when I ran for chair of the party recently, and when I transitioned from my 7th district chairman position, this is something that is not only critical, but one thing that Melissa Klink said yesterday is, I want people to understand the importance of this vote extends beyond the boundaries of Gwinnett. There are folks in rural Georgia right now that don't have access to health care. I'm excited about Gwinnett, but let's be honest, our challenge in the metro Atlanta region, and for those of us who live close enough, is the traffic, right? Yes. But there are folks right now in rural Georgia that can't even go to a medical facility, don't have access to 911 services or wireless broadband, so transportation is extremely critical. So I just wanted to throw it out there so that you can share with us how we can help out.
Okay, if folks want to sign up to volunteer, they can go to, it's a bit.ly link. So it's bit.ly /transit Gwinnett. So that's bit.ly, bit.ly /transit Gwinnett, TRANSIT. And Gwinnett spelled out GWINNETT.
And we'll post it on Bluetopsy. My handy technical, co-host, multiple hat wearing person will make sure that is posted online. Now, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, which it kind of is in line with that. Again, when I ran for chair, one of the reasons that motivated me to do that, and congratulations to Nikema Williams, and we want to support everything she's doing. But one of the things that I thought was extremely critical was the importance of the 2020 election extending beyond Atlanta and the metro Atlanta region. Now, while I still consider Gwinnett as a part of the metro Atlanta region, I was very happy to see Elizabeth Warren make her first Georgia stop in Gwinnett. Over 1,100 people showed up. Here we have, an amazing leader in Gwinnett and yourself, and to see the national spotlight hit Gwinnett is only a sign of things to come. How important was Elizabeth Warren's stop there, and how important is it, and what kind of message does it send to anyone else running for president that wants to come to Georgia? What kind of message was sent, and what do you really think came out of that?
So I think, more broadly, I view Gwinnett County as kind of like ground zero for the work that we will need to do to win.
Bold statement.
In the long run.
Yeah.
Gwinnett County is the most diverse county in the entire Southeastern United States. And for the longest time, it had gone red. And we saw that kind of dissipate and fade away in 2016 when the county went for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is that nothing else did. we weren't having the success in any other way. And it was like, well, what's going on here? We definitely do have the potential to be a blue county.
Yeah.
What was that all about? And so maybe some people voted for president and they dropped off in other ways, or maybe I don't know. I will say that we didn't have Democrats on the ballot largely, which was a huge problem.
And I think people, you guys need to understand what she just said about the diversity of that county. You have, I think 144,000 Spanish-speaking Gwinnett County members, 19,000 speak Korean, 15,000 plus speak Vietnamese. You have one of the highest populations of Serbo-Croatian. I mean, you guys are like, shout out to my friend Ted Terry, but you guys are like a Clarkston on steroids, right? Because you have so many, members of the community. And even, we saw last year, Carolyn Bordeaux put up a amazing fight, come within 433 votes of making it to a runoff. Mm-hmm. But, we couldn't bring up Carolyn without bringing up Ethan Pham or bringing up David Kim. Mm-hmm. And in respect to all the other candidates, but we saw an influx of communities that, especially in the Korean community, that said, hey, this is an election, regardless of a person's argument for it. We saw very high numbers of folks that traditionally may not have been engaged for whatever reason, whether it's neglect or, language barriers. Mm-hmm. But I think you are spot on, because what happens when the totality of Gwinnett comes out, not just for MARTA, but for a presidential election or for a local election? And I think that is not only why you guys are ground zero, but I think it gives a hell of a lot of opportunity for your sister county. Shout out to Forsyth, where we are right now.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
it's motivating to us, because while we don't have those numbers, we have the fastest growing Indian population in the state of Georgia. Mm-hmm. We have a very consistent group of Latin Americans that live in our county. Yes. Even though our black population is right around 5%, we're seeing those numbers increase. So we're not where Gwinnett is, but we have increased over the last 30 years, and to the point of, thanks to people like Eric and Anita Tucker and Randy Ingram and all these folks that are in Forsyth, we've actually flipped a precinct here, and we only see that getting better. So I just wanted to shout out to Forsyth County.
Shout out
plug
Forsyth.
our home base.
Yes.
So
Okay, so that kind of brings us full circle about all this. It was really interesting. Basically, Gwinnett became majority minority 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. So you sit there and go, there's basically been this whole gap between, the change that you're starting to see, and there was like a lack of execution. And from what I've read in your background that I really like, and it's what we're talking about in Forsyth, you've got to go and penetrate into all these different communities. And it seems like the Democratic Party, where it's gone wrong or had slacked off, there's a Chinese American group for Republicans that have started here in Forsyth, and we're sitting here going like, we've got to get into all those communities, because folks come as a blank slate and they don't have an allegiance to a particular party. Republicans walk in and say, like, you're a small business owner, this is what we can do for you. There's no counter narrative. So what do you see is, how you basically, for all these other counties that are below where Gwinnett is, kind of like a Forsyth, what steps should they take?
that's a good question, man.
So
I didn't think of that one.
I've been writing out this plan and working with some folks.
I wish you guys could see her face right now.
Yes, I'm over here like Peaky in the Brain, how to take over the world. But yes, that is the goal. That is the plan. But so I would say a couple things. Even though I'm the Democratic party chair in Gwinnett, I have a very service and community oriented view of what our responsibilities are. We can't, and what the Democratic Party has been criticized for repeatedly, can't just say you're the party of the people, then you get in and maybe you don't serve them in the way that they think that they should be served.
Or just come around when it's time for a vote.
Or come around when it's time for a vote. We don't have any expectations of Republicans. So, when they do things, it's not like we're surprised by it, but we hold our folks to a standard of accountability. And we have to rise to meet that, to recognize that there's a certain need that our community has, and we have to show up to fill it. One of the ways that we can do that, and I believe that the Abrams campaign created a very, very novel model for how we do that. You know, we're not in the business of converting other folks. I mean, if they want to come over and sit with us, they're going to come over and sit with us. But our thing is we have to figure out how to engage our people.
And I think that's the mistake we've made for too long, you know, even going back. And Jason Carter and I are very close friends, and we had this conversation from lessons we learned from 2014. But you know, it's almost like the model for the last 20 years is how do you be more center, right? And then left, you know, second. So like we're neglecting our base and not organizing our base, trying to appeal to people that quite frankly have no interest in being appealed to. And we find ourselves in this repetitive state of losing. And I mean, I'm just going to say it how it is because I don't like to lose. And I think you're spot on because we have a base of people that either feel neglected, are not engaged, or don't know what the hell we stand for.
Yeah.
And I think your approach in not just saying I'm doing it from a democratic centric place, you're saying, you know, there's a community aspect of who you are that if people buy into that community aspect, it is in total alignment with your democratic leadership.
It's understanding that, you know, the work that we do as a party, you know, it transcends what happens in a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And so most people don't want to come sit in a meeting and hear people bicker or whatever they may do in a meeting. You know, they have no interest in that. What they want to know is, what do I do?
Yeah.
How do I do this? You know, how do I help address these problems that my neighbor is having? And if we are present in the community, we can provide the answers to those questions, but also figure out who actually does have the interest and build a pipeline for them to come in and to lead and to build the vision overall of what the party is needed for to do. And, you know, I really do think we have to think about changing the model of how we operate. And I really enjoyed your plan, the 5 Georgias, and recognizing that our communities are very different and they need different things. Just like, you know, we put the Asian community in this one pocket. But there's so many different types of Asian communities.
That's right.
We have over 100 languages spoken in the Asian community in Gwinnett by itself.
You're right.
By itself. So, you know, you have to understand that if you're talking maybe to the Chinese community and you're talking about democratic stuff, that they may not view it like Democratic Party based here. It'll be based in a cultural reference from where they come from. And they will reject it. So you have to learn how to communicate to people across the cultural barriers, the racial barriers, all the things, you know, and we have, you know, more narrowly looked at it as just race and gender or
It's like a one size fits all
even
politics.
geography. You know, it's not one size fits all.
Not at all. And I think, you know, and Eric, you chime in too, but I think we also need to look at some radical policies that may motivate some other areas. Like, for instance, I love the Tacoma, Maryland model where they've lowered the voting age to 16. Because what they've done in Tacoma, Maryland is they saw a drop off in their vote with young people. And they said, you know what? You can get a driver's license at 16. We want you to vote at 16. The city council, when they proposed it, the increase was upwards of 30 to 45% in new voter participation.
Wow.
We saw these amazing things. And I feel like you're absolutely right. One of the reasons we are having a conversation about a Forsyth County Film Festival is because we want to make sure that the culture is highlighted. We don't want to assume we know what our East Indian brothers and sisters are wanting in our county. It's very clear that they have, in Forsyth County, one thing that I'm really excited about is we have cricket fields now. And instead of us assuming that we know what they want, why not engage them where they are and engage them in what they do and not assume that we know or that our plan is going to automatically work because they share the diversity that we're trying to attract. So I'm very excited about your leadership and about what you said, but I do want to push back just a little bit and ask you, for those naysayers that see a young, ambitious woman of color, right? And I don't think it's limited just to race, but you are the first woman of color, if I'm not mistaken. well, woman. So you are the first woman.
Just
period,
woman.
Just
Period.
That is in Gwinnett. No, thank you for correcting me. But that's in Gwinnett, and I want you. You know, I was in the meeting when you were giving a very ambitious plan, including raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for your local party to be able to operate and function. And I saw the body language of some people change because they're looking at you and they're saying, that's really ambitious. And I think some people are not only afraid of change, but they're afraid of, you know, an ambitious person making a very, in some respect, out of mind type of goal, right? So, and I know you want to chime in on that as well.
So a crop of us were at your meeting, and when you said that, it was like, yeah, that's bold. That's leadership.
Yeah.
You know? Because some people, well, just so everybody knows, you said, hey, you know, we have a goal for $250,000 for the Gwinnett County Party.
And for anyone that doesn't know about the county party structure, most ambitious county goals are probably $3,000-$5,000.
Yes.
So when you said that, what I noticed was we saw it as very bold of you to say it because that's the kind of leadership we're looking for, whereas some other people looked at it and said, yeah, okay, that was cute, right? So what do you say to people that might not understand the importance of bold leadership?
Oh goodness.
She took a sip of water on that one, y'all.
Where do I begin with this one? When I was installed as chair of the county, and I didn't write a speech, so I didn't come with prepared remarks. I just walked up there and I looked out in the crowd and I kind of laughed to myself because I could hear my mom telling me, girl, you got some nerve. And she's always told me that for as long as I could remember. And as I shared with the Dems at that time, and will continue to harp on this, if I did not have nerve, I would not have come from homelessness to where I am right now. If I did not have nerve, I wouldn't have graduated valedictorian in spite of all the odds that I faced, telling me that I couldn't do this or I wasn't smart enough, and overcoming, you know, being in a learning disability class. If I didn't have nerve, I would not be here right now. I would not be here right now. And if we're going to rise to the potential that I know Gwinnett can, we're going to have some nerve. But for too long, you know, we have been complacent and very accepting and walking very cautiously and hesitantly, missing the fact that we have a huge Democratic community in Gwinnett. They have been kowtowing to Republicans. Oh, we don't want to upset them. No, we're going to upset the status quo. We're going to upset that. That's because right. We deserve more.
Shake the tree.
And it makes me so angry when people, you know, are like, ooh, I don't want to rock the boat.
I heard somebody in that same meeting literally contemplate if we should not say that the Democratic candidate running in Snellville was a Democrat. And that offended me because the nerve and the audacity for us to try to hide the fact that we're proud Democrats says a lot about the party. So we've got about 7 minutes left, and it's been really fun with you. I like to attribute a quote whenever we have a guest that we're excited about that I would like to read that reminds me of you. And then, Eric, I want you to bring us home and, you know, allow our guests to share anything else. And if you've left anything else, just kind of make sure that our listeners have it. But it's a quote that I think is right on time that says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frighten us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous, all of which you are. But actually, who are you not to be? You're a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. I wanted to say with you that it's not only an honor to know you as a friend and support you as a powerful woman, but to really watch from a distance, that distance being Forsyth County, the work you're doing. And I can only imagine where Gwinnett County will be once your leadership comes to an end. And we hope that's a lot longer away than sooner. So I wanted to say that to you because we're inspired. People like Melissa Klink, who's in our county chair, we think the world of you, and we think that there's limitless potential in Gwinnett. So thank you for being here with us. Eric, you want to take it over from here?
So when it comes to county parties, when we talked to Melissa last night, these conversations are fun because like when you know somebody, it's so loose. So like Melissa, one of the things that we have seen, like turf war, we're in this county party and you're in that county party and we don't want to work together or we want to get the credit. And so what we've done over here in Forsyth, we're like, we don't want credit. We just want to get Democrats elected, and we want to bring our values. Yeah. What do you say as the county chair in Gwinnett when it comes to this old school kind of I want attention and I want the credit?
So one of the very first things I did in the days after I was elected chair was I sat down with folks that worked the statewide campaign. Mm-hmm. Who are the county chairs you recommend I talk to? Yeah. And guess what? Within I was elected on the December 13th, and on January 1, we were having a video conference, me and those chairs that we were able to assemble, a video conference talking about how we can win, right. Strategies that work, strategies that didn't work, what you need to know, what, pitfalls to avoid. I have made it a point, from a personal standpoint, professional standpoint, to make sure that connectivity is there. Mm-hmm. And we'll continue to make that happen. I'm committed to that because we cannot do this alone. And if there was anything that I learned from working on the coordinated campaign, you need strong county parties. Right. And the county parties cannot be at odds with the state party. Nobody can walk around thinking that they're better than the other, because we need each other.
That's right.
We need these county parties to do the community building work in their communities. Mm-hmm. They may not know how. You have to teach them. That's right. And if the state party is not teaching them, then they can learn from other county parties. And that's what we can do together. So it's part of my goal to change Gwinnett, but to also take it up further north. Like, right. Building relationships with you all has been such an amazing thing. I talk to Melissa. Melissa teaches me. Daniel teaches me. Yeah. I learn from you all just as much as you all are saying that you're inspired. I'm just like, I didn't plan all this. I didn't have a master plan. I'm just moving. Yeah. So we can move together and really shake some stuff up.
There you have it. Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Bluetopsy, I learn every single time we have a guest on, and I've sung her praise over and over again, but we're going to definitely have you back on. Mm-hmm. We want to know how the martyr vote turns out, and we would love for you to give us, and one thing, if the state party is listening, we need more post-election analysis, right? Like, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? Where can we improve upon? So we would like to invite you back to do a post-vote analysis. If it passes, that's great. Let us know what's next. If it doesn't pass, I'm going to be pretty frustrated, but we're going to figure out what we need to continue to do, right? So let's just hope that the latter does not happen. Yeah. It's going to pass. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the atmosphere, and we would love for you to come back on because we want that to be contagious. We want to see that happen in Forsyth County. We want to see that happen all over the state because transportation is critical to lifting people out of poverty and to connecting us and positioning us to be a city that can be competitive globally. I want Atlanta and Metro Atlanta and the counties throughout Georgia to compete with the likes of New York and California and so many other areas. So thank you for being a guest on our show today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So as always, this is what we do at the end of the show.
Okay.
We have to tell everybody where they can find us. You can find us on Instagram Facebook and Twitter at Bluetopsy. And then we know that you'll retweet all our stuff, you know.
And how can people find you?
Okay, sure. Well, we're definitely on Facebook.
There we go.
We're on Instagram and Twitter, but you can connect with us by going to our website, www.gwinnettdemocrats.com, and there you can find a way to sign up for our email list and also to volunteer for this transit referendum. We're out here canvassing and getting it done.
Yeah.
Or you can go to bit.ly/transit Gwinnett, and you can sign up there.
And we'll post it on our website. My name is Daniel Blackman.
I'm Eric Cohen.
And we will see you next time. Who's next? Is it Carolyn? Carolyn Bordeaux?
Most likely, Carolyn.
Most likely?
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next time on Bluetopsy. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.